Alabama Crimson Tide went on the road. Again, it was a survival mode Saturday, found a way to get a win at Arkansas, 49-26. In the early going, you said 17 points. They're going to cover that with ease. I did not say that going into the game, but the way that they started this game, they were firing on all cylinders. Bryce Young was dealing. The run game was going. The defense was looking solid. There was a lot of things going Alabama's way. Isaiah Bond, a guy that regardless of the quarterback situation needs to be looked at. He's a young gun. I think he's only a sophomore. He was moving yesterday. Caught a deep seam over the middle. Got even with his man, and he was leaving. He could be that deep threat that they're waiting for to step up at Alabama. He's a guy that I'm excited to watch going forward. However, Bryce Young, towards the first part of the second quarter, rolls out to his right. His old teammate Drew Sanders trips him up around the legs for a sack, and Bryce Young falls on his shoulder, had to leave the game. Visibly upset. We're not going to give you a play-by-play as to what happened on that injury. But bottom line, enter into the game, Jalen Milroe. And Jalen Milroe is a freak show. I tweeted it out. He is a psycho in the weight room. I mean, seeing him do hang cleans is just a scary, scary sight. No quarterback should be able to move that kind of weight. But when Jalen Milroe entered the game, it was evident this was a different Alabama offense. And that's not to knock Bryce Young, or excuse me, that's not to knock Jalen Milroe. He's just not Bryce Young. He just can't do the same things as Bryce Young can. And that's, again, not to knock him. There's nobody else in the country can do what number 9 does. But the offense operated very, very differently with him behind the wheel. And Jalen Milroe is a great athlete. He can't throw the ball like Bryce Young. Maybe that changes with a couple more weeks of preparation. Maybe if they have to work him into the system, he can be that guy. But when I was watching, they became very one-dimensional. It became old-school football. And that's tough to do on the road against a ranked opponent. I get it. It's probably one of the least ideal situations to be thrust into. But it was tough to stretch the ball downfield. It was tough for them to complete passes. They were out of sorts. And what you saw Arkansas do, started to climb back into it. The crowd was going crazy. Arkansas was starting to get their rhythm, get their tempo. They cut it to 5 points. It was 28-23 at one point. And this is when Alabama sort of adjusted. Again, similar to what we talked about with Kirby Smart, Nick Saban, one of the best adjusters in college football. Bill O'Brien made a phenomenal adjustment. They just said, Jahmyr Gibbs, your game, brother. Go do what you do. Ripped off 2 70-yard touchdown runs. And here's, I think, the big takeaway for me when I talk about Alabama going forward. When they don't have what they need to have offensively, if they don't have Bryce Young, they still have Jahmyr Gibbs. That's why you got him in the transfer portal. Because last year's Alabama team, I don't know if they win this football game. And last year's Alabama team played for a national title. Having Jahmyr Gibbs on your roster was the difference yesterday. And credit to Alabama. For them to get pushed around on the road, we had talked about that going into this game as well. If Alabama gets pushed around, if you're going to beat Alabama, it's got to be at your house. And Arkansas had everything teed up for them to win that game. And Alabama just sort of collected themselves, no panic, new guy at quarterback, found a way to get it done. So looking forward, the assumption, again, we don't know, this isn't like a practice report on an injury for Bryce Young, but the assumption is Bryce Young's going to be okay. Nick Saban didn't seem overly concerned in his press conference about it. We think he's probably going to be okay. The issue, however, is you have A&M next week. And A&M beat you last year. I mean, in College Station, don't get it twisted, but A&M has done a lot of talking over the offseason. Remember that whole exchange with Jimbo and Nick Saban? There's going to be a lot of juice around this game. And A&M is going to give you their absolute best shot. They just got wounded this week against Mississippi State. They're going to give them their best shot, all they can handle. So I'm excited to see what happens there in the A&M game, obviously. But the one that you got to look at going forward past that is at Tennessee. That's the game that could get you if you're Alabama, especially if the absolute worst-case scenario happens and Bryce Young's shoulder continues to bug him. You have to go with Jalen Milroe. I'm very curious to see what would happen if Alabama goes into a game planning around Jalen Milroe. Do they allow him to get a little more easy access throws in the short game? Do they allow the game to come to him a little bit more? Or is it kind of, hey, what you saw in that Arkansas game is what you're going to get from Jalen Milroe? They become one-dimensional. It's an old-school football team. And the luxury for Alabama in this game was, again, they were able to run the ball effectively, but with a whole game plan around it, with Jalen Milroe's tape now out there for the defenses, I just wonder what's going to happen. I wonder how that would look going forward. Again, we think Bryce Young will come back. They were fortunate to get a win this week, and I think it says a lot about their program, a lot about their culture, to take a punch in the mouth, no starting quarterback, still find a way to get it done on the road. The Tide roll 49-26. You better believe they're moving up in our top 4. We had them at 3 last week. They're going to go up a spot or 2, something tells me. So we'll get to that here in a minute. Hey, y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also, be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.